This is a big one, and this one can be kind of confusing sometimes. I've noticed a lot of animation students in the past, they kind of get confused on when to use one or the other, and that is straight ahead animation as opposed to pose to pose. It's a lot of poses animation. Pose to pose animation or straight ahead. Pose to pose animation tends to be, I'll use that type of approach to animating a scene when I have a scene that has a lot more emotion, a lot more acting, not a ton of movement. Sort of like what I'm doing now when I'm talking to the camera. I would figure this out pose to pose. And what that means is that I would listen to dialogue, if there is dialogue, or if there's not, I would kind of think about this action, and I would with the dialogue, for instance, I would listen to the dialogue, and as the dialogue plays, there tends to be phrases within the dialogue. And as I listen to those phrases, I imagine the poses that the character might hit during those phrases, and I will draw those out and kind of time them out on my exposure sheet, the length of the shot that I'm trying to animate. Sometimes it's just a few drawings. It might be 3 or 4, maybe 5 drawings. And that will give me kind of a roadmap to where I want to go, where I want to animate from pose to pose, and that's where it gets its name. I'm animating from pose to pose. Now there are techniques that I'm going to show later on through the animation so it doesn't feel like you're just going from one pose to another pose to another pose. This is where we're going to pull in some of our other fundamentals where we do some overlapping action, and we have some different timings of different parts, and that'll make it feel more fluid. Now the other approach to animation is called straight ahead animation. Now straight ahead tends to be used when there's a lot of action. And you can't really figure it out pose to pose because each drawing or frame tends to be different than the last. You can't really work within a pose. You're really doing a lot of action. For instance, if I were to get up and grab my wallet and run out of the room, I would probably do that as straight ahead animation. Okay, so straight ahead is, you're trying to figure that action, you're trying to feel that action, and you're drawing out each piece as you feel it go. Now there's drawbacks to straight ahead animation. One of the things that's difficult with straight ahead is that your volumes, meaning the sizes of parts of the character or whatever, those volumes, if you're not careful, can get away from you. As you're animating straight ahead, you're getting further and further away from that original drawing that you started with, and each drawing is going to be a little bit different than the last. So if you don't pay attention to where you started, volumes can grow and they can shrink. As a matter of fact, way back early in my career, one of the first projects I ever worked on was a Roger Rabbit animated short called Roller Coaster Rabbit. And I was a cleanup artist. I was the guy that took the animator's drawings and redrew them and made the nice clean drawings that you see on the screen. And I didn't really know what I was doing. I'd only had 6 weeks of animation training, and I was kind of plopped into this position. And as an assistant animator, which I was, it was my job to pick the key drawings and redraw them and send them down the road to the people behind me, and then they would fill in the gaps, the in-between drawings to smooth out the action. Well, my mistake was I just took every other drawing. I would take the first one and draw it, and then I would put the next drawing and put it aside, take the next drawing and draw it, put the next one, put it aside, grab the next drawing, draw it. And I went through the entire scene like this, and then the in-betweener came in and in-betweened all the drawings. Well, I didn't pay attention to the volumes. I animated everything straight ahead. So when we played that scene back, and if you're familiar with Baby Herman, who's got this little round bald head, when we played it back, Baby Herman's head was going brrr, and just growing and shrinking and doing this kind of thing. So that you got to really pay attention to where you start. One of the great things about using TV Paint, or if you're working on paper, you have that ability to go back and look at where you started. With TV Paint, I can put on the onion skin and I can see the progression of the character, so I know if it's changing form or that sort of thing. But anyway, I thought I'd give you some examples of straight ahead animation and pose to pose animation. Let's go ahead and jump in. Here, I thought I'd go ahead and quickly just show you what I would be thinking if I was doing some straight ahead animation. Here I drew this little faceless character. He's got a little ball for a head. But I thought maybe we can start him moving forward, maybe walking, and maybe take a little leap up into the air. And so if I have that action in my head, the first thing I would do, I'd start with that first drawing. Let's go ahead and start another one. I'm going to turn on the onion skin. And so once again, I'm thinking about, okay, he's going to step forward, sort of like the dancer that we showed earlier. He's going to step forward, and I want to have him anticipate this jump and jump up into the air and then land. Okay, so there's no real point in doing that pose to pose because everything is going to be different. So I'm going to start him just moving forward. He's going to slow out of this pose. Remember, we were talking about slow outs. I'm going to have him start to bring his arm forward. I'm going to click back and forth so you guys can see. And he's going to bring his body forward. There we go. I'm going to leave this foot back here. There we go. Let's bring this foot over here. Let's bring that up. There, you can see him start to take that step. I'm feeling that, I'm feeling his weight starting to come forward. Let's grab another drawing. Let's start. He's coming down. Actually, let's do this. I'm going to bring him up. Let's bring him up a little bit. That would be a better... See, this is the great thing about straight ahead animation too, is you can, as you're thinking about the action, you can go, you know what, I think it might be better if we do this. And you can feel that action. So I want him to really kind of take a stride first. So he's going to come up. You can see that movement. He's coming up, taking a stride. I'm going to put that foot right out in front of him, like so. See that? I'm going to pull that foot back. Let's bring this arm. He's taking a step forward. Maybe the other arm's coming back now. So if I scroll between these, you can see him start to come up. We're working straight ahead. I'm going to time these out a little bit too. Let's time these out. I'm going to put these on 4 frames. And we'll talk more about, spacing out, timing out drawings later on. But right now, we're just going to pay attention to the action. I'm just really thinking about that straight ahead action. So he's going to hit that peak right there. Body's coming forward still. Maybe that foot is really reaching out now. Like so. And this foot back here, he's coming up onto his toes. Yeah, I'm feeling what should be happening. Right now it's sliding. There we go. We don't want it to slide. And that arm's coming around. You can see it's kind of foreshortening as it goes around him. The arm's coming back right here. So if I scroll through, you can see he's taking a nice big stride. So now I want him to scroll that back. I want him to come down. So I want to feel that compression. I want him to, once again, as I'm working straight ahead, I'm feeling every piece of that movement. I want to really feel, I'm imagining myself. I'm imagining, how would I be doing this? And so I want to feel those physics. And so now he's coming down, and if he's coming down, remember I talked about before how animation is very, very both left and right brained. And this is where that left and right brain comes into play, because I'm thinking about this very, very analytically. I'm thinking about the physics of this. I'm thinking about, okay, now, if he's just come forward like that and that weight's coming forward, then I know that foot's got to land and he's going to take some weight, like so. And then this foot's going to start to come forward and it's coming off the ground like so. See? Boom. Boom. And as that foot comes down and his weight is starting to shift, then these shoulders, his arm here is going to start to come back now. He's changing the stride. The arm is, there we go, is going to start to work its way back. We're going to get a little reverse on the arm back here. We're moving forward, we're going straight ahead. See that? Boom. Let's add another drawing. So let's get him down really low. So I want to get a nice compression. And also, remember I was talking about arcs. Here, look at that arc that he's following as he's stepping through, coming down. I'm going to have him kind of compress a little bit because we want him to jump up in the air. And let's bring this arm back. And this other arm's going to start coming forward really fast because he's going to throw that arm up. Coming forward. Body's compressing. Let's going to bring this other foot forward. Let's bring it. It's going to start to come up. I'm going to just slide it in here. Boom. See that? And I'm going to go one more drawing. Get him compressed. I want to get him right down in there. I'm thinking of this straight ahead. Let's get him right down into his most tight position. I'm going to bring these arms up. Like so. Get both of these legs bent right in here. You can see I'm being really loose with it too. See that? And then the first thing we're going to do is we want that energy to burst out of there. So here's our anticipation. Remember, we were talking about anticipations also. So I'm working into this anticipation, working straight ahead, and I'm having him come down, and he's going to jump up. But I want that leap to happen with his arms too. I want the arms to kind of lead with that action. So let's hold him back just a little bit. He's starting to move up a little bit. Maybe the legs are tightening up. He's starting to move forward. Get those legs in here. So you see there's a little bit of movement there, but the arms are going to come up really fast. As a matter of fact, I'm going to drag them. I'm going to really just drag them, stretch them. You know, we're talking about squash and stretch. I'm going to really kind of distort the look of those arms. We'll bring the other one up here. And so now let's get him to really start to explode. So he's going to jump up. There we go. And I'm going to straighten out his body. So here we had this nice reverse. You see the body is turned like that. Well, now I want to straighten it up. I want to reverse that and get a nice explosion. It's coming straight up. Let's straighten those legs. Everything's coming up nice and straight. I'm going to bring those arms up. He's throwing his arms up, getting the momentum to jump up in the air just like you would. If you imagine yourself jumping, you use those arms to throw up into the air. So, boom. You see that he's starting to explode up into the air. Let's go to the next drawing. So here now, I want to really stretch him. I want it to feel like he's really kind of pushing up. I'm going to maybe even stretch his head a little bit, which I could have done back here. Let's do that. I'm going to stretch his head a little bit. There we go. Come up here, stretch that out. And let's really, really stretch. I love doing this kind of stuff. It feels really neat. I'll stretch him up, get him up on his toes. He's just about to leave the ground. Throw his arms up in the air. You can get really loose with this. This is where when I'm working straight ahead, I'm not worried about the quality of the drawing. I'm worried about getting that action. See that? Boom. And now we're going to snap them. We're going to snap them right into place. So he hits the top up here. Let's get the body up. So now all of a sudden, pop his body right up in the air. Poof, poof. See that? And we'll get the legs up. The legs have snapped up into the air. Once again, thinking about the action, feeling about how it should go, working straight ahead. That's what straight ahead is. Working completely straight ahead. Got his arms up in the air. There, feel that? Let's change a little bit of timing here. There we go. Boom, boom. See that? Now, let's get him a little bit more compressed. Thinking about our timing, remember we were talking about the bouncing ball. This is where everything comes together. I'm working straight ahead, and I want him to slow down as he comes up. And then the overlapping action is his body is still moving up. Even though the head is kind of starting to hit its apex there, I'm bringing that body up. It's compressing. You see that? The body's on its own arc there. His legs are continuing up. You know, I want it to feel like he's got a little bit of hang time. And I'm scrolling back and forth. Maybe his arms now start to relax, like so. There we go. Put that on for 2 frames. I'm still going to hang him. He's hanging up in the air a little bit there as the body follows through. Remember that term, follow through? The body's coming through now. Legs are starting to come through. See the action? See how they're coming through? The body's kind of coming ahead in front of the head. Thinking about this action straight ahead. There's the other leg right there. Going very loosely. Maybe the arms start to drag now. You're starting to pull those arms back. Like so. Boom. And once again, being careful of those volumes. And you can see, even as I'm getting into this, the volumes are shifting a little bit. It's not too bad, and I have the ability to pull it back. But we've got a certain volume here and a certain volume here. You see his volume has grown just slightly. So I'm conscious of that, and I want to be sure not to let it get too far out of hand. So now let's go ahead and have him, let's stretch that head. And I'm going to start to straighten out his body. And drag those arms. There's the other foot there. See that? Jump. We get that nice stretch. Let me turn off the light table so you can see each individual drawing. Jump. See that? We're feeling it. We're feeling the action. You know, there's a little bit of a pause right in here. We'll have him pause. Let's extend that pause out. Let's make it like an 8-frame pause. There we go. Let's shrink up this timeline a little bit. So you can see him pause and then jump, pause and then jump, jump, jump. And then he starts to come down. Let's go ahead and add another drawing. Let's turn our light table back on. There we go. And now he's really kind of stretching down. And we want to maybe reverse, get a little bit of a reverse on that body. And his legs are coming straight down. Maybe his feet are dragging, like so. You see that? Arms are dragging way up here. You know, he just did a big leap, so I'm stretching out. I want to get a nice straight. I want to follow that arc. See, we've got this arc that's come through. There, see that? Boom, boom. And then we're going to have him start to land. Now the body is coming down. He's going to compress a little bit. There's his feet. And I'm going to have him leaning back on that weight a little bit because he still has momentum going forward. And his arms are dragging, like so. See that? And you can see that head is going to start to arc forward. I'm thinking about all these different things as I'm animating straight ahead. This is the whole idea of straight ahead. And so now I can have him compress. Look at that nice arc there, and a nice bend to the legs, like so. Maybe the hands are coming down, like so. You see that? He jumps up in the air and he lands. He jumps up in the air and he lands. And so this is how we think in straight ahead animation terms. You see, taking a little step, compress, and jumps and lands. In just a matter of minutes through this straight ahead thinking, you can blow through a scene fairly quickly. And it's really all about just getting that action down and really kind of feeling it. You always have the ability to go back and readjust drawings. With something, you know, this simple, you can blow through pretty quickly, but there's a lot of times I have a very complex character, maybe a four-legged character or something like that, where I want to move through it straight ahead, and then I watch that animation, and there's going to be mistakes. Don't get me wrong. There's, even now, you know, with all the experience that I have, I still make mistakes, but at least you can kind of rough in that action, and then you can go back in and you can adjust time, you can redraw a couple of things, but it's really about getting those first initial impressions down, okay? So that's straight ahead animation. Now let's talk about pose to pose. Let me jump to a different shot. Now, I have a scene that I did. I'm going to go ahead and black this out real quick. There we go. I have a scene that I did where I grabbed a big chunk of dialogue. Now this is a scene that later on I'm going to take you through my entire process on how I approach animation. This is a pretty big scene. I did it especially for these courses. And I want to kind of explain to you how I approach the pose-to-pose aspect of it. So there's a film that was done in 1981 with Katharine Hepburn and Henry Fonda. It's called On Golden Pond. And there's a great piece of dialogue where Katharine Hepburn is talking to Henry Fonda. And I listened to that dialogue over and over again. Let me play it for you really quickly.
Listen to me, mister. You're my knight in shining armor. Don't you forget it. You're going to get back on that horse, and I'm going to be right behind you, holding on tight, and away we're going to go, go, go.
So that dialogue, it's a very intimate scene. So I chose to kind of frame it tightly. I decided I wanted to animate this bear character, this female bear, delivering the line. And I wanted it to feel intimate. And so with a scene like that where it's very intimate, it's tight, it's subtle acting, it's very, very hard, if not impossible, to animate something like that straight ahead. It's very difficult. So what I wanted to do was listen to each one of those phrases. I'm listening to the dialogue, and I'm imagining what kind of posing she might go into with each different phrase. And you can see back here what I've got up a bunch of thumbnails. Thumbnails are these little drawings that I will do when I'm listening to the dialogue. And it's basically coming up with the poses for each one of those phrases. And that's where that comes into, pose to pose. Remember, we're talking about pose to pose animation. Well, I'm figuring out the different poses that I kind of see in my mind's eye as I listen to that dialogue. And I'll go through, and I'll do hundreds of these sometimes, and pick all my best ones. And then I'll pull them together, and then I'll bring them into my scene, and I'll lay them out on the animation line, on the timeline. And I'll time those out. And that pose to pose action will give me kind of a rough feel for what that scene might be. And I want to show you what that looks like. So what I did was I went ahead and I took each one of these drawings and I put them in the timeline, and I timed each drawing out to kind of fit the dialogue. It's going to be very choppy. It's going to be nothing like what the end will be, but you can start to get a sense of the framework, of the attitude of the character and her delivery. So let me play it again for you with just the poses in there.
Listen to me, mister. You're my knight in shining armor. Don't you forget it. You're going to get back on that horse, and I'm going to be right behind you, holding on tight, and away we're going to go, go, go.
Now, you can see that it's very, very choppy, but what I'm trying to do is each one of those little poses in there represents an idea that she's delivering. And I know that within these poses, when she hits a pose, I'm going to be animating little bits of action and that sort of thing within the pose, okay? So there's going to be a lot of connective tissue between each one of these poses. That's the term pose-to-pose animation. I'm laying out the entire framework before I put in all the in-between drawings. And so then the work that comes after that, the work is to blend that action, to fill it out, to smooth it out in a way that feels natural. Remember, I was talking earlier that we don't want it to go pose to pose. You don't want to just blend poses together. There's going to be bits of animation between each pose that I'll be explaining later to smooth out that action and make it feel more natural. I want to show you now. I'm going to kind of knock the opacity down on this version. I'm going to play the animation over the top of it. The finished animation, so you can see how I went from pose to pose, but there's animation with, working within each one of those poses. So I'm going to knock down this opacity here. There we go. And I've got a layer on top of the finished animation. And what I did was I worked right over the top of these rough drawings with my new animation poses. And you can see, if you look down on the timeline, I've got a lot more drawings in there that kind of fill out that action. But let me go ahead and play it for you. And you can see how the animation is going to hit a pose and we're going to move within it, then it's going to jump to the next pose. Watch.
Listen to me, mister. You're my knight in shining armor. Don't you forget it. You're going to get back on that horse, and I'm going to be right behind you, holding on tight, and away we're going to go, go, go.
I'm going to let it go one more time.
Listen to me, mister. You're my knight in shining armor. Don't you forget it. You're going to get back on that horse, and I'm going to be right behind you, holding on tight, and away we're going to go, go, go.
So you can kind of see how those drawings, how they moved from pose to pose. I'm going to pull it back one more time. I'm going to play it for you one more time. This time I'm going to play it without those original poses. I want you to see just the animation. And then you're going to start to see, oh yeah, I see where it's moving through some of those poses, but we're animating within them. So let me go ahead and play it one more time. This is the final time without the initial pose test, but with all the in-betweens set in there.
Listen to me, mister. You're my knight in shining armor. Don't you forget it. You're going to get back on that horse, and I'm going to be right behind you, holding on tight, and away we're going to go, go, go.
So, one of the big advantages of working pose to pose, you can see that her volumes and everything stay consistent. And you get a lot more control throughout the scene. As I was mentioning earlier, the big job in the scene is to make sure that you're not literally animating pose to pose. You're getting a lot of animation within that, okay? So I hope that makes sense. So straight ahead animation where you're animating kind of big actions and you're just kind of feeling it and you're animating straight ahead. You're feeling each, segment of that action and drawing it. Being careful of volumes, making sure that your volumes don't grow and shrink. And then there's pose-to-pose animation where you're listening to dialogue or subtle acting and you just want to hit a couple of poses and then animate between those poses. Okay? Let's move on to the next one.